All right, well, thank you. So my name is Brian Hosie. I'm the SVP of Engineering here at Lendio. All right, well, thank you. So my name is Brian Hosie. I'm the SVP of Engineering here at Lendio. So Lendio is the largest small business marketplace for small business financing. Sorry, largest marketplace for small business financing. So we're local. We were founded by two co-founders who met at BYU, and their names are Brock Blake and Trent Miskin. And when I joined Lendio, we were just right out in South Jordan, right off of the freeway, in a little gray building that was ugly and dirty and cramped, and but we had a lot of great people there. We had about 100 folks, and we've grown all the way up to, at times, had almost 2,000 people working for us, mostly temps through the COVID area, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But yeah, we match small business owners with sources of capital to help them grow and sustain their businesses. So most small business owners are not well served by traditional banks and credit unions. So the typical story is a small business owner will, they'll look for capital in some way. Maybe they need to make rent or, make payroll or buy a new refrigerator or truck because their equipment broke down. And the first thing they do is they go to their bank that they've been working with, maybe shouldn't be names. So the big banks that you see around here, they typically go there. And the thing that that usually happens is they will be declined. A lot of times it's just not profitable for banks to underwrite kind of those smaller dollar loans. So they tend to prefer to focus on maybe, $1 million, $2 million, $5 million loans for businesses. And so then they think they want an SBA loan, and SBA loans are very complicated. They require a lot of documentation, and sometimes they can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to close and fund. And so if your truck broke down and you're a landscaper, you don't have 3 or 6 months to wait for an SBA loan. So Lendio and the whole fintech industry grew out of the 2008 recession, and we were starting to serve a market where all of these banks tightened their credit policy. They wouldn't actually lend to pretty much anybody. And so new players came on that were trying to disrupt that industry. And Lendio was part of that growth. So we don't actually lend any money to small businesses. We have built an application that takes, we use machine learning, we use data science, and different algorithms to match people up to one of the 75 lenders on our platform. And we earn money traditionally through earning a commission when we match that small business owner up. So we don't have any loans on the books or anything like that. And it's one of the things that's been really helpful for us to kind of weather the ups and downs of the economy, because if a lender goes under or they fold for any reason, we're ready to, when we're able to slot them into a new lender into the marketplace and take over the business stability. So it's been really helpful for us not to have to lend money ourselves. So we like to say we're helping to fuel the American dream. During COVID, we actually participated in a program called the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP. And there was a lot of fraud in that program, but we were one of the largest, if not the largest, facilitator of those loans, and we did everything above board as far as checking, payroll and checking all of the different documentation. A lot of lenders have gotten in trouble over their behavior in the program. We've actually helped the DOJ prosecute lenders. We've been a character witness and just a witness in the program, and how we facilitated that program is considered the model by the government. So we're really proud of that. So during that time, we helped about 100,000 small business owners secure about $8 billion in small business financing. So So I'm excited to share a little bit about my career with you, how I went from being somebody who was working odd jobs. I had no education beyond high school diploma. I launched a late career in software development, kind of around the time that I was 28, 29, and eventually started leading a division as part of an executive team. And no, it didn't work. There we go. Pushed it too many times. So there's three primary lessons I've learned over the last 20 years since beginning my college and career journey, starting at the age of 23. Those lessons are, number one, get out of your comfort zone all the time. Number two, always ask for what you want. You are always going to be your own best advocate. And then number three is luck is the intersection of hard work and preparation and always being open to new opportunities. So I'll talk a little bit about getting out of your comfort zone first. In this case, me getting out of my comfort zone. So my story begins in Vegas. I was born and raised there, but we moved to Utah just before I started my junior year in high school. I was able to find a group that I fit in with, but I always longed for home. And so I moved back to Vegas in the year 2000. Once I landed, I moved in with my best friend from high school and his mom, and I started working a string of several decent but uninspiring jobs. I did sales for Gateway Computers. If you guys remember, some of you may remember the Gateway Country stores. You'd walk in and buy a computer. I worked there, and I wasn't very good at it, but it paid a few bills. I even tried door-to-door sales with alarm systems, and I'm now hate every door-to-door person that comes to my door. And let's see, what else? I worked in a print shop. The primary way that print shop made money was we printed tickets and posters for circuses, like very small circuses that you've never heard of. So just a lot of really boring jobs. Around 2003, came to the realization that making $15 an hour was not going to meet my life goals. So at 23 years old, sold everything I owned. I had a condo with a mortgage down in Vegas. Bought that with the friend I moved in with when I first moved down there. I had my dream Harley, sold it. Moved back to Utah and moved into my parents' basement. That was a humbling experience for sure. So I come back to Utah. After some deep research, I had learned that if I registered for Salt Lake Community College, so I came back here, with my parents' address before I turned 24, I would be able to pay in-state tuition. And so I could spend significantly less money obtaining the degree. So I was looking at like coming back to Utah. I absolutely did not want to come back to Utah. I have great loving parents, but I'm kind of a lone wolf, so I did not want to be anywhere near them. I just wanted to visit during holidays. I was looking at Portland. For some random reason, I thought Houston might be awesome. I don't know why, but that was on my list. And so, yeah, it really came down to the tuition. So another important aspect that drew me back to Utah was that earlier that year, I'd re-met the woman who would become my wife. So she was a friend of a friend, and they had planned a girls' weekend trip to Vegas earlier that spring. So that's us in San Diego. So I met up with the girls group for one night, and Sherida, her name's Sherida, and I connected. And we spent the next several months messaging each other back and forth. I say re-met because we actually met years earlier on a double date around 1998. She was dating a different guy at the time, and I was dating her best friend. So we went to Hunter High together in West Valley. We graduated the same year, but we had never met during school. So in the fall of 2004, at the age of 24, I started here at Salt Lake Community College. I had 24 random credits to my name. I tried all sorts of different things. I spent most of my time in the technology building, and then whichever one is on the other side of it.
I don't know.
It's like where all the hard stuff was, because I thought I was going to be a graphic designer.
Okay,
So-
you guys switched around.
Things have switched, okay. This was a long time ago. So I had collected, 24 credits in the late 90s, from SLCC and from Community College of Southern Nevada. I don't even know if that's the name anymore, but that's what it was then. I spent 3 years with my head down. After 1 year, I finished at SLCC with an associate's in general studies, and I transferred up to the U. After 2 years at the U, I graduated with a BA in history in 2007. So history and tech obviously go really well together. I chose to study history for a couple of reasons. One of those was because I figured if I was going to be spending, several $1,000s, tens of thousands of dollars, and 3 to 4 years of my life studying, I better focus on something I'm actually interested in. And I better enjoy it. But more importantly, a couple of years prior, I'd taken an intro to philosophy course down in Vegas. And the professor stood up on the first day of class and held up a book. And his book is called A People's History of the United States. It's by Howard Zinn. And if you've never read it, it's essentially about all of the major events in US history, but written from the loser side. So the first chapters open up with like the journal entries from Christopher Columbus. And he's talking about, hey, he has this disdain for all the natives that he met. He talks about in his journal, they're so welcoming, they're so trusting, they're going to be so easy to enslave. And so all the way up until, when I read it, it went up through the Clinton presidency. And so it was every single major event, but just written from the opposite side. So he had told us that he had colleagues who had been censured by their schools for teaching out of that book. And also he had a few colleagues that were high school teachers that were fired for teaching of it. So I thought that was pretty awesome and I needed to know more. So when I told my fairly successful uncle, he was living down in Vegas because my whole family from there, what I was going to be studying when I moved back to Utah, he gave me one piece of advice. He said, all I can say is go get the degree that's going to earn you the most money. And it's probably pretty common advice. It's probably pretty smart too. But I couldn't disagree with him more. I have developed this habit that started when I was a teenager. If somebody tells me I can't or shouldn't do something, I'm obligated to prove them wrong. All in all, once I buckled down, I finished my college career in 3 years. I treated it like a job. Didn't really participate in, quote unquote, the college experience. And I think most students here is like probably, understand that. During that whole time, I worked about 25 hours a week at Starbucks, specifically so I could qualify for health insurance. This was before Obamacare, so you got booted off your parents' insurance when you turned 18, essentially. So rather than working at a Starbucks here in the Valley, so I was living in West Valley, my parents' basement behind Hunter Library. I was going to all my classes here and at the U eventually, but then I worked at Starbucks at Kimball Junction near Park City. And the reason I chose there is they paid $1 more an hour because it was a resort area and the tips were a lot better. So I could barely afford my car payment if I drove all the way up there. So after I graduated, I had no idea what to do next because I'd been so focused on just getting the degree. So I started thinking my best move was to get promoted to a Starbucks store manager. I interviewed for it, but I got turned down. And that was the thing, I think the catalyst for my very unexpected career. So shortly after, I landed at a place called UHEA. It stands for, or stood for the Utah Higher Education Assistance Authority. And UHEA was a subsidiary of the Utah System of Higher Ed. And it was essentially the arm that ran all of the student loan programs, federal student loan programs for all the students in Utah. So, yeah, they administered every single loan, which back during that time, because the program was state run and nonprofit, all proceeds from the interest rates and whatnot were funneled back to students and folks who were paying those loans. So many people, myself included, we were all able to pay back student loans, sometimes at 0% interest, because it was a reward for making on-time payments. In 2008, the private programs such as UHEA, they were all disbanded by the executive branch, and they were all of the servicing started going through federal contractors. And so that's the system that you guys, if you have student loans, are probably working in today, and they're probably much higher than 0%. What is the current interest rate? Do you guys know? No.
It was 6%.
Is it 6%?
Not now, back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, so I remember a time after UHEA was kind of shut down and they were all going through whoever the servicer was at that time, they were over 8-9%. So they're probably around something like that today.
What did it stand for again?
Utah Higher Education Assistance Authority. So I started at that job. My job title was going to be Operations Support Analyst. And one other thing I forgot to mention. So I ended up getting the interview and took the job there solely because the associate director, who was my boss's boss, who's going to be my boss's boss, he was a graduate in history from the University of Utah also. And so I said, why did you, I don't even feel qualified for this position. I don't even really understand it. My title was Operations Support Analyst. So I was telling people about, hey, this is my last 2 weeks at Starbucks. I'm going to go be an Operations Support Analyst. I don't even know what that means. But it's not working here. So that's awesome. And so back during that time, because, or I guess I started writing procedures and technical documentation. So that's kind of what the position was. So it was a lot of technical writing. As resources were spread thin, I took on more and more different responsibilities. As a student loan servicer, UHEA was mandated to provide outreach to middle and high school students on saving and planning and paying for college. Basically, even though we were guaranteeing and servicing student loans, we were required to do everything we could to prevent kids from taking out student loans. And on many occasions, I would drive to schools all over the state. There was one time I grabbed a rental car. Like they told me at 3 p.m. there was an event down at Ute High School, which is way out in the middle of the state. This was 3 p.m. Go down to the fleet yard for the state, pick up a rental car. Your event starts at 7. And so I drove down there at 7 p.m. or got there at 7 p.m., did a 1.5 hour presentation, and then turned around and drove back home, got home at like, I don't know, 1 or 2 a.m. So it was fun. I really enjoyed it. But in 2008, the iOS App Store, iOS version 3 just came out, and everybody, including my boss, wanted an app. And it was the new hotness, right? Everybody had to have an app for something. We figured we could create an app that would provide Utah students with all of the information we were providing through our outreach efforts, but we'd be able to reach even more students and provide all of that information just on something that was internet connected and, up to the minute, up to date information. We had a small software dev team at UHEA, but they were all Windows based, not very interested in working extra hours on an iPhone app. No interest at all. So I had some experience when I was a teenager in the 90s making very simple, stupid websites for my band. Played guitar. I thought they were cool, but they weren't. And I really enjoyed graphic design classes in high school. So I did what any normal person would do. I raised my hand and said, I think I can figure that out. I can figure out how to program an iPhone app. How hard could it be, right? So I assumed fairly hard. but I also assumed I could do it and I could figure it out eventually. So my boss gave me his credit card, sent me down to the Apple store. I bought a MacBook Pro, an iPhone or an iPad Touch or iPod Touch, and 3 programming books on. It was basically how do you program and how do you program iPhone apps. And so I sat at my desk for 8 weeks straight, plenty of nights and weekends, even though I was newlywed, and I eventually got something that worked. When I presented the app to the team, it was an instant hit. So I showed, I looked at, I knew that, it was clunky, it was buggy, it didn't really work the way I thought it should, and it was very poorly programmed. Like if a real programmer saw it, they would probably laugh at it. All they knew is that I had delivered something that nobody else was even willing to try to do. And so it was a big hit with everyone. A couple months later, we presented that app to a consortium group of different states. So UEA have like a counterpart in pretty much every state. And we all get together and talk about what we were doing for outreach and the program and helping kids and whatnot. And so we presented the app, lots of oohs and ahs, and everybody was really excited. And so the director of the state of Oklahoma's program pulled me aside and she said, could you make one of those for me? And so I knew that the source code that I just written and the intellectual property was owned by UEA and the state of Utah. And it was created on their time with their equipment. So I went to my boss, the one that took a chance on me, and I told him about the opportunity. And I said, if I take my own time, I use my own equipment, I'm going to utilize the knowledge that you basically paid me to learn. Can I do this for Oklahoma and can I charge him? And he was super supportive. So I didn't really know how to price software projects because this was like the first thing I ever programmed, and never had any experience in like pricing or selling or anything. Oh, bad experience in selling, I guess. I drafted a rudimentary like order form, and I quoted the director of Oklahoma 15 grand to build their app, and she immediately accepted. So I'm pretty sure I left money on the table. So I think in hindsight, I probably, I had done this once before. It only took me a couple of weeks. I got some help from my brother, who was a CS computer science major up at the U at the time. And we did it in about 2 weeks. And that 15K was the catalyst for long-term financial security for me. So I was able to pay off all of my student loans immediately. And then as a reward to me and Sherida, I bought motorcycles for us. So the last time I owned a motorcycle was that Dream Harley that I had back in Vegas. We had to pay for school, get married, buy a house. We usually at the end of the month usually had about $50 in our checking account after all the bills were paid when we were first married. And so they're a passion. Motorcycles are a passion. I ride now more than ever. I ever have before. Not long after, I was spending more and more time programming all sorts of Skunkworks projects. So, my boss's boss, who was super supportive of this whole app, is like, what about this? Maybe we can make this. Maybe we can do that. And so I would just, these other programmers that were at UEA, they weren't interested in any of it. So I just kept taking more and more of them. So I finally worked up the nerve to ask for a huge raise. So at the time I was making, so this was, 4 years out of school, couple of years of experience. I was making finally about $39,000 a year. And all I knew, because everybody's salaries on the state were published, right? So you could see public salaries. So I knew every programmer was making about $60,000 a year. So I asked them 60 grand. I figured I was programming full time. I should be paid the same as a programmer at UEA. They shot me down. They said something about not having the budget to increase my pay. But I had fallen in love with programming. And I knew if I was going to continue to learn and grow, I'd also have to be paid my worth. I need to get out of UHIA and into a place I could learn from others who are more experienced with programming. So I don't know if any of you are kind of familiar with kind of software development or the industry in general, but maybe 5 to 8 years ago, there was a really big industry that's kind of fizzled out. It was coding boot camps, and you'd see the billboards and stuff all over the place. And they'd usually say, you know, come to a boot camp for 15 weeks and you'll get a six-figure job right out of class. Well, that was a complete lie. I've hired a lot of boot camp grads, and you're walking in as a boot camp grad, and you're competing against folks who have 4 or 6 years of, computer science at a 4-year university. So I just would say, hey, I'll pay you 50 grand, take it or leave it. I'm not going to negotiate because I'm going to have to train you a bunch. So you never did make 100 grand going out of a boot camp, but this was all happening before boot camps were ever a thing. So I had to like take my classes, read a lot of books, and just do this. I'd work my day job, and then I would just teach myself how to program at night. So I knew I needed to get out of UHIA, and I needed to learn from those who were a little bit more experienced than me. So I applied to a dozen different jobs that had headlines like rockstar developers needed and coding ninjas wanted, and I landed a few interviews. One of those interviews was for a small startup, and they were waiting on their Series A funding. So for those of you who may be aware of how like venture-backed capital works, so usually with a startup, you have they're usually not bootstrapped, especially tech startups. And so the founders will have an awesome idea, and then they'll create a deck that is way better than this one. And they'll go and pitch their idea to all these investors. And, usually they'll do like a seed round and get some initial capital. And then they'll do like a friends and family round where they get all the friends and family to throw in a few bucks. And then finally you get a little more legit when you get your Series A round. And then every time you do a round of funding, it's Series A, then Series B, then Series C. So you could tell when a company says like, hey, we're at Series E, they've done 4 rounds of funding before that. So these guys were waiting on their Series A funding. They had no money. They basically said, we couldn't even hire you until the check clears if we wanted to. So I interviewed with the CTO and the co-founder, and I did a pretty good job overall, but when he started asking me a ton of detailed questions about JavaScript, one of the coding languages that's really popular on the web, my lack of knowledge immediately showed. So he was super hesitant, and I knew I was losing him. So asking for what I want, I told him, hey, look, I'm a quick learner. I know I can figure anything out. So why don't you give me a homework assignment on JavaScript? I'll prove to you that I can learn anything. So he gave me a challenge, something that they had recently struggled with, and then he sent me on my way. So this challenge was basically, the company was way back when Facebook was just getting started, used to have Facebook pages, and it was like this little web page you can make on your Facebook company page. And so this company was called Grow Social. And they made a little widget that you could stick on your Facebook page and run contests to get leads for small businesses. So if like you're an Etsy seller or something, right? You could post hey, enter your email address, like our page, and then, share it with friends, and then you'd be entered into a contest to win an iPad or something like that, right? And it's how a lot of folks got leads for their business early on. And so one of the widgets that they had was you could display your products, like all your Etsy products, as an example. And those products have different heights and different widths. And so they had to display them across the page, all at the same height. Even when you didn't know if there was 10 or 20 or 30 products to display, and you didn't know how big they were going to be, because all of the product information was coming in one after another when you load the web page up. So you have no idea how many products you have to display. You have no idea which one is the biggest one, and they all have to be the same size. So that was the thing they were struggling with. They had found a solution, but that's the problem they gave me to solve. So I took the rest of the afternoon off of work. I worked on the project very late into the night. I think I was able to finish it around 3 or 4 in the morning. And so I took a few hours, grabbed what sleep I could, and then I got up at 8 a.m., got to my job at UDA. But right before I left home, I emailed my homework assignment to the CTO, co-founder's name is Chris. And then I drove into work. So at 10 a.m., Chris is calling my phone. And I answered it. He told me he wanted to offer me a job. He was so impressed. I got the assignment finished so quickly. And he even confided in me. I honestly didn't think I'd ever hear from you again. So, needless to say, I accepted the job. I was going to be commuting I was living in Magna. It was the first house we bought when we were married. And I was commuting to Orem in an S10 Blazer, which got like 14 miles to the gallon. So it was an hour and 10 minutes each way. And I was filling my truck up with gas every 3 days. But I also knew Series A was super risky. I would be lucky if that company was still a company in 2 years. But I figured I had to get in with them so that I could learn what I needed to learn, and I would just be prepared a year from now or a year later when I was going to be looking for, I assumed, the next job because they had shut down. So I knew I needed to keep learning and growing, set myself up for that next job. And so for the next couple of years, I worked with Grow Social, took on every challenging project that I could. I was employee number 5. They had 3 co-founders. One was in charge of sales, one in charge of marketing, and then Chris, the one in charge of tech. And then there was one other engineer. So I just learned everything I could from Chris and this other engineer. So we grew that company to over 20 employees. It was eventually acquired by a larger company based in Chandler, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix. And when the time came to eventually move on, I found Lendio. So this is the building that we're currently in. It's right next to Cabela's. So we get to look down at Adobe, which is pretty awesome. Lendio is new, fresh, and exciting. So they're what I call a book company. So book companies are those that they're inspired by the works of like Jim Collins. They want to be good to great or built to last or something like that. But Lendio was the first one where I talked to the founders and talked to people who were working there, and it felt like they actually were trying to build a company like that, not just paying lip service to it. So it's coming from a company, had almost 1,000 employees. Lendio was much smaller at around 100 employees. And so I wanted to get back to my roots after several years in management and started getting a bit rusty with coding. So Lendio allowed me to put my headphones on and get lost in coding all day again. I knew that Trent, he was the CTO and co-founder, had told me he was looking for someone to take over his role leading the engineering team. I just assumed that it was going to be years down the line. So he took me out to lunch 10 months after I started and said, it's time. So he promoted me to senior director of engineering, later to vice president, and then finally to senior vice president as we have the team grow. So I've taken the engineering team at Lendio from a dozen engineers. They're mostly junior. They needed a lot of help with growth. They were, coming out of boot camps like we talked about, to building a team of over 100 individuals. And Lendio at different times has been over 1,000. We're at about 350 right now. So like many companies in the last couple of years, we have a board of directors that has cautioned us that cash is key. And to preserve cash flow and cash in the bank at all costs, while the equity markets right now are basically closed. Nobody's getting loans, nobody's getting financing. Hang on to your cash, don't burn it. And that's very different than how startup culture has been in the last several years, especially before COVID. So, we've had to scale back a bit. But if you want to lead in business, and I assume that's where all of you folks are at, because you're in this class, you have to make difficult calls. So calls that will affect the livelihoods and future opportunities of people and their families. But always make those difficult calls with compassion, understanding, and support. So I'm proud of Lendio. We've been fortunate to always give people a very soft landing into their next role. Even during times when there were behavioral or performance issues with individuals that just couldn't be rectified no matter what we tried, we were still able to give a very soft landing to those folks and be successful in their next role. So today we're growing, where we just really most of this year, we've been celebrating profitability. So Lendio is paying its own bills and, tons of exciting things that are going on, which is crazy for a venture-backed company, especially at this time. We hear that from our board all the time. We're the only portfolio company that they have that's making money. So it's a good place to be, whether you're in sales, you're in marketing, product, engineering, operations, finance. It's just, we've been really fortunate. So I've been there almost 9 years, had the opportunity to learn, grow, tackle new things. And if I could give a final piece of advice, it'd be to seek out all opportunities to learn, grow, or take new initiatives on. Don't settle for whether something is your job or not. And this is what I love about Lendio is nobody says that's your job or that's my job or you're not allowed to do that because it's not your job. And if you ever find yourself around a group that is like that or is trying to build empires and hoard resources or hoard people, the only way they can get something done is that person has to report to them. Break out of that environment and seek out a better way. I've learned everything from how to sell, which, by the way, sales is everybody's job, regardless of what role you're in. I've learned how to read and run P&Ls and balance sheets. I've learned HR law, how to focus on, what's best for the person across the table rather than what's best for me or for Lendio. And that's been critical for sales and negotiations. So in 13 years, we've helped 500,000 small business owners secure over 15 billion in funding, and that's continuing to grow. And so all of this learning, all of this growth, it's made it possible for Sheridan and I to take on our next endeavor, which is small business ownership. So after significant planning, saving, and plenty of debates and discussion, Sheridan and I are actually opening our own business in early 2025. So we're opening a Hawaii fluid art franchise. And so this is paint pouring, liquid art, and I brought several of the pieces that we've created, just as we've kind of been exploring this. We put in an LOI, a letter of intent, to the district. Actually went in yesterday. And so we're really excited about the spot we're looking at is right there by the theater in the district. So we're really excited about that. And I'm back to learning new and interesting skills. Things, once you kind of get settled in your career, things can get stale. And so this is a new opportunity for us to learn and do things that we've never been done before. So get out of my comfort zone again. And I'm excited to be on the hook for all small and big decisions. So right now I can make a call, or I can make a big decision or a small decision, but ultimately it's broad and trend where we make the final call. And so with our own business, we get to be the final call. So I've had a few more things to say, but I know we're going to be out in about 5 minutes. So I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions you have. And also feel free to come take a look at these art pieces that we've made. So we're really excited about it. Yeah.
Do you think your history degree helps you in any way in your career? Would you keep your major, or if you could go back, would you change it?
I would definitely not change it. I don't know if I would actively suggest that somebody go get a liberal arts degree if they know what they want to do. But it taught me how to learn more than anything and how to communicate and write. And it was, I mean, it was lucky, but it is the thing that got me that first job at UVA, I think.
I actually see a lot of those like advertisements for boot camp.
Yeah,
Do you think it would be more beneficial to actually just go for a minor in like say information systems or something like that around the lines of like tech, or would you think a boot camp would give the same benefit?
if you're already, in an institution, you're looking for a minor, I would, yeah, information systems or computer science or any of those fields, you will learn more concrete skills than you will with a boot camp. A boot camp will basically teach you the bare minimum to not blow up a computer. And it is expected that you're going to learn a ton on the job. And that's the case anyways with really any degree, but there's a much larger uphill battle if you go to a boot camp, and it's way more expensive.
Like this, I guess pertains more to like the software engineering side of things, but I know like there's a bit of a higher unemployment rate right now with like those just from friends and family that I know that are in the industry. So I just want to know your take on it, like if you were to try and get into it next few years, what would your recommendations be?
Yeah, it's brutal right now in the industry for software engineers and for product managers as well. So the problem is that the market was flooded with bootcamp grads, and it was impossible to distinguish between all the different resumes. They literally were the same. I did this project, it was a to-do app or something like that, and I worked with these folks, and it was exactly the same. You just you could pick any one out of a hat, and you knew you were going to get, like, it was a crapshoot of whether they're going to work out or not. So I would definitely not go that route. I do feel like there's an upward swing, and there's a odd thing in the industry where you have a lot of folks who get really excited and they want to try it out. And usually within about the second year in the career, they either really love it or they just attrition out. They say, this isn't for me. So if you can stick through that second to third year and get some experience, just take any job anywhere and don't worry about how much you're going to get paid. Once you get to year 3, 4, 5, there's a desert of talent. So I can either find somebody who's really junior, and I'm gonna have to, I won't pay them a ton, but I'm gonna have to teach them a ton, or I can hire seniors who have been in there for 8, 10 years, and they're really expensive, but it's really hard to hire somebody in that middle ground that is affordable and already trained. Yeah.
What made you want to start your business?
I'm a glutton for punishment. No, it came down to, we wanted a way to like, I'm really into just kind of general investing, like slow investing, or if you've heard of the FIRE movement, kind of, which is financial independence, retire early, basically. Don't spend any of your money, save all of it, let it build and compound and grow and so on. But I was looking for another way to kind of invest and generate cash flow, and hopefully have an off ramp to a 9-to-5 job and be able to spend more time with my family. And so we looked at a number of businesses, over 24 different franchise opportunities, and we loved the support that this company provided. We loved the opportunity, I loved the unit economics of it, and just the whole experience of it. And I think it's something that will work. I have a pretty large network down in Silicon Slopes, and I know that we all have large budgets for team activities. And I figured that was something that would balance really well with my day job. So who does all the art?
Yeah.
So in all of the studios, the employees are typically the ones that create the art, and you can buy them straight off the wall. But the business is really focused around come into the studio, make your own art piece. So whether you make your own art piece, so like Sheridan made this one. I've told a few of you this was Duran Duran themed 80s band. these were really just no theme. We just shared, I made this one, I made this one, and we just picked the colors because we liked them. And so you go in, you come into the studio, and whether you make your own art piece or whether you buy one off the wall, they're the same price.